Have you ever questioned what time actually is? Not the clock ticking away. I'm referring to the way it folds and bends while the world is asleep. You feel as though time itself is observing you when the streets are deserted, the sky is silent, and you are the only living person. Since I began working the night shift at Redwood Regional Airport, that question has been nagging at the back of my mind. Beneath the foggy valleys of Northern California lies a lonely expanse of concrete. I expected it to be serene. Long hours spent sipping cold coffee and listening to the gentle buzz of runway lights. Blinking through the mist were interspersed with a few cargo planes and a few late-night flights. However, I didn't find tranquility there. Rather, I discovered regulations. And what lies behind such regulations? Something is observing. It all started last Thursday evening. At precisely 1:27 a.m., I arrived at the airport parking lot. The fog was dense enough to cause the streetlights to seem as pale, quivering halos, and the air was so chilly that it nipped through my jacket. There were just 3 vehicles parked beneath those lights, my own, the janitor's, and Mr. Keller's dull gray sedan. Silent and sterile, the terminal loomed ahead. I could see the fog's reflection moving across the asphalt like restless ghosts. Through the towering glass windows, the only thing I heard when I entered was the mechanical hum of a vending machine, its fluorescent light flickering like a dying heartbeat. Keller, a tall, worn-out man in his 60s, was waiting next to the security counter. His eyes appeared as though they had not seen sunlight in years, and his pale face was etched with deep creases. He gave me a clipboard without really saying hello. He stated bluntly, "These are the night protocols. You must adhere to them precisely." Ben's voice was steady. But what about his hands? They shook just enough for me to notice. In an attempt to lighten the situation, I laughed a little. I have a lot of experience working night shifts. I am aware of how this proceeds. Keller, however, did not chuckle. He simply gazed at me, his eyes hollow and lengthy, like someone staring through a glass at something they wished they couldn't see. He remarked, "This place isn't like the others." He turned and went down the maintenance hallway after saying, "Read the rules before you start." His footsteps reverberated for an excessive amount of time before becoming silent. I unfolded the paper after taking a seat at the vacant terminal desk. It was old, with ragged edges and a yellowed surface that suggested years of photocopying. Night Security Rules, Redwood Regional Airport, effective 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. was the heading. There are 8 rules. That was all. However, something in my chest started to tighten as I read them more. First, stay inside the main terminal between 1:30 and 2:30 in the morning. Avoid peering out the windows. I grinned at first. It sounded ridiculous. Don't you glance outside? They were anticipating ghosts, yet even as I read it, my gaze kept going to the windows. The fog felt like something behind it wanted to peek in, pressing on the window as if it had weight. For a brief while, I thought I saw a faint shape standing in the mist, head tilted slightly, but immobile. "It's nothing," I whispered. "Just a trick of the fog." 2. Pay close attention if you hear the announcement system activate when no one is around. You shouldn't do it. Don't reply. The line. You shouldn't do it. There was something intimate about it, as if the rules knew me before I knew them. 3rd. Walk the entire length of Concourse B once between 2:30 and 3 o'clock in the morning. Maintain a low flashlight. Steer clear of Gate B3. Why just once? Why is the flashlight kept on low? The more I stared at that page, the more questions I had. Yet the heavier the air felt. 4. After 3 in the morning. If someone knocks on the door of the staff lounge, don't let them in until they accurately say your entire name. I couldn't decide whether to shiver or laugh. Why would someone bang on a closed terminal at 3 in the morning? 5th. Check the baggage carousel at 3:30 a.m. Press the red stop button right away if it's running. Avoid looking at what's on it. My heart skipped a beat after that. The words "do not look at what's on it" sounded like a warning taken straight out of someone else's worst nightmare. 6th. Avoid approaching a plane that is taxiing on the runway if the tower indicates that no flight is scheduled. In the control booth, turn off the lights and bide your time. Now the paper was shaking in my palms. It was simply jitters, I assured myself. However, the fog outside had gotten thicker, and I thought I heard a distant engine's faint whine through it. 7. A woman in uniform will be approaching gate A1 around 4 in the morning. Don't talk to her. Don't follow her, I gasped. There will be a woman. You will, not if or maybe. It was terrible, that certainty. 8. Return this clipboard to the maintenance office at dawn. You'll be able to tell if everything was done correctly. You'll know word to words that simultaneously seem to be a threat and a promise. I recall reading those regulations over and over again while the buzzing fluorescent lights overhead flickered a little. Each rule became more and more ingrained in my thoughts, until I could practically hear Keller's voice whispering them in the back of my skull. And as 1:30 a.m. rolled around, I sensed a change in the atmosphere rather than the room. The airport seemed to have let out a breath. Something moved somewhere behind the glass. Before I knew it, the night had started to breathe alongside me. I wish I could claim that I survived that night unharmed, that I was certain of what was genuine and what wasn't, and that I adhered to the rules. However, when I went into Keller's office at dawn to return the clipboard, he glanced up at me and remarked, "You weren't supposed to be back." Even worse, I realized at that very moment that I couldn't recall ever leaving the terminal. I read the list twice, the first time out of curiosity, and the second time out of a growing awareness that I shouldn't. I initially believed it to be a complex hazing ritual. It's possible that Keller wanted to see how seriously I would take my new position, or it's possible that he simply liked watching newcomers fumble in fluorescent lighting. However, the list had a distinct quality. My skin prickled because of something in its tone, the way those last words, "You'll know if you did everything right," lingered like a chilly breath on my neck. It was 1:45 a.m. already. With the exception of the slight electrical hum of the overhead lights, the airport was completely silent. That low, steady sound, like an insect imprisoned inside the walls, formed the night's beat. I looked at the digital clock next to me. The seconds passed slowly and obstinately, as if time itself had grown weary of moving. I considered leaving for a split second, of leaving through those automated doors and never returning. However, I didn't. The night plays tricks on weary brains, so I told myself I was being foolish. I stayed as a result. I began looking at the security monitors as a diversion. The dreary monotony of a forgotten land flickered across each screen, bathing my face in frigid blue light. The vacant terminals, with chairs neatly organized in lifeless rows, were visible from one camera. Another, shrouded in mist, kept watch over the runway. The third concentrated on the cargo area, where a forklift, like a latent animal yearning to awaken, sat still in the gloom. Everything appeared excruciatingly commonplace. However, I had a sneaking suspicion that ordinary didn't belong here. My eyes then strayed to the big window in front of me. The mist had thickened. It wasn't simply thick. It was intentional, weighty, and pressing against the glass as if it intended to seep inside. Beyond that, the runway lights were dim, casting warped halos that were lost in the darkness. At that moment, rule number 1 began to resurface in my thoughts. Remain inside the main terminal from 1:30 a.m. to 2:30 a.m. Avoid staring out the windows. A shiver ran down my back. I swiftly moved my chair away from the glass and forced my gaze to remain fixed on the monitors. But despite my best efforts to concentrate, I could still feel the pressure behind me, as if the fog were observing. I know it sounds crazy. Fog doesn't observe. However, reasoning can occasionally falter when your heart is beating too loudly and the air is too silent. For the following 30 minutes, I did not turn my chair. I didn't look up, not once. However, I heard a slight tapping sound against the glass. Like a bone shattering in the dark, the quiet broke. There was a dry flash of static as the overhead speaker crackled to life. My leg struck the underside of the desk as I recoiled so violently. The voice that came next was distorted, stretched, and twisted by the outdated PA system. "Attention! Attention passengers!" It sounded as though it was underwater or coming from a great distance. I froze. Tonight, there were no passengers. There are no flights planned till the morning. Flight 117 has landed, the voice said, each word dragging over the ceiling. Please go to gate B3. My blood became icy. B3 is the one location that the regulations advise staying away from. This must be a test, I assured myself. Keller must have pulled a practical joke, perhaps to test whether I would freak out. The idea made me want to smile, but my mouth would not budge. Then I saw something on the screen. The Concourse B camera briefly flickered before stabilizing. The light from the motion sensor had turned on. There was a person present, barely discernible through the blurry footage. A faint shape emerged at the far end of the passageway. It walked slowly and purposefully, resembling a person, but not quite. The proportions didn't appear right, perhaps too tall. Alternatively, the head may have been tilted at an incorrect, abnormal angle. My throat constricted. I leaned in. From its hand, something dangled. It was dragging it across the ground. A second later, I heard the sound through the speaker system. It was weak but genuine. Uneven footsteps synchronized with a gentle, lingering beat. Once more, the PA crackled, but this time there was only static. Then something that sounded like whispering appeared in between the outbursts. Just their form, not the words themselves. At that point, the rule resurfaced to me like a directive. Pay close attention if you hear the announcement. System activate, but no one is round. You shouldn't do it. Don't reply. My heart pounded in my ears as I sat motionless, every muscle stiff. It seemed as though sound could not pass through the viscous air. I didn't answer. I stopped breathing. I did nothing but gaze at the screen till the figure gradually disappeared into the mist. The motion light went out in a flash. The PA abruptly fell silent. It was 2:30 a.m. on the desk clock. At that moment, I realized that I had been holding onto the desk's edge so tightly that my knuckles had turned white. It was over, I told myself. Whatever odd test this was, I had passed it. However, when I reclined in the chair, attempting to control my breathing, a faraway, broken voice on the desk mumbled my name. Furthermore, it didn't sound like Keller. Rule number 3. You must walk the length of Concourse B once between 2:30 a.m. and 3 a.m. Hung over me like a warning. Maintain a low flashlight. Steer clear of gate B3. Tensing every muscle, I forced myself to stand and reach for my flashlight. Its beam illuminated the polished flooring that shone in the weak emergency lights, cutting a narrow, wobbly line through the terminal's thick blackness. My march toward something I didn't want to call was marked by the unusually loud echo of my footsteps, which bounced off walls like a distant drumming. The dull fluorescent faces of the vending machines flickered like dead eyes as they flashed dimly throughout the hallway. I made an effort to concentrate on ordinary objects, such as a garbage can or a line of vacant chairs, anything that would help me stay grounded. I froze halfway down Concourse B. Wet tracks on the ground marked a rough route from the emergency escape directly to gate B3. The prints were tiny yet intentional, almost human. Under my flashlight, the liquid glistened slightly, reflecting the low light like a trail that I was forced to follow. My throat was dry as I forcefully swallowed. The footsteps came to a sudden halt in front of the gate. I noticed a faint handprint placed against the fogged-over glass doors. Only one. It was smudged, as if it had been waiting for me. I gripped the flashlight more tightly. Like a warning bell, my pulse pounded in my ears. My thoughts then returned to rule number 3, stay away from gate B3. As directed, I took slow, careful steps back while maintaining a low flashlight beam. I was afraid to turn around. Behind me, the concourse seemed to go on forever, and every tentative step seemed to change the shadows. I eventually arrived at the end of the corridor. My chest heaved and my legs shook. With every step sounding like a countdown, I circled back to the main desk. It was 2:58 a.m. when I got back. I had barely made it through the first patrol. Just as I was settling into the chair to try to quiet my racing heart, there was a slow, methodical knocking. "Ben, it's Keller," a voice called from the staff lounge behind me. "Would you mind opening up?" I froze. Above the lounge door, the hallway light flickered. I clenched my fingers around the desk's edge. Keller was expected to spend the entire night in the maintenance area. He was here, but why? My thoughts quickly turned to rule number 4, which states that you should not open the staff lounge door until your complete name is appropriately said. Once more, the voice dragged slowly through the silence, saying, "Ben, come on, open the door." There was a problem with the cadence. Too flat, too intentional, too sluggish. The realization that this was not the Keller I knew made my stomach turn. I didn't respond. The voice paused, then muttered once more, "Ben, it's me, Keller, no last name yet. Leaning forward with my hand hovering over the doorknob, I forced myself to swallow my fear. With a shaky voice, I murmured, "Say my full name." Quiet, after what seemed like an eternity. The voice rasped gently, "You already know I can't." The light flickered again, and I watched in frozen fear as the shadow behind the door appeared to slip away, leaving a shape behind like a liquid. The feed from the hallway camera was empty when I looked at it. Absolutely quiet, however. I was aware of what I had heard. I was starting to persuade myself that my mind was failing by this point. Perhaps I was experiencing hallucinations due to the tension, loneliness, and boredom of the night. Perhaps it was all a dream, pieced together by terror and exhaustion. Then I heard it, the baggage carousel's low, persistent whirring as it came to life. There were no planned flights. A solitary, worn shoe rolled onto the belt as it slowly spun, initially empty. My heart faltered. Another item emerged, a tiny, ripped suitcase tag with blackened, seemingly singed edges. Then something twisted and pallid, like a sleeve, rolled across the moving belt. I was having trouble breathing. In a surge of fear, rule number 5 came to mind. Press the red stop button right away if the carousel is in motion. Avoid looking at what's on it. I turned away from the belt and forced my eyes down. My hands trembled as they hit the red button, and my legs moved instinctively. The carousel moaned, trembled, and then came to an abrupt last stop. Silence for a heartbeat. Then a low, rasping sound coiled about me from the shadows of the stopped belt. Too late. I whirled around, my flashlight shaking in my hand, but the place was deserted, or nearly empty. I needed to breathe. The terminal's walls seemed to be getting closer to me, like a silent weight that I was unable to ignore. The nothingness surrounding me made every stride I took toward the control booth, with a view of the runway sound empty. Now, the fog had become nearly unnatural, thick and viscous, sticking to the lights on the runway like smoke from a dying fire. It turned common lights into luminous, flickering specters, blurring the boundaries of reality. I noticed it at that point. An aircraft, taxiing on the runway's edge. It had a vague form, as though it had been conjured by the fog itself. However, no flights were booked. There were no lights in the tower. Static hung heavily in the air. There were no markings on the airplane, no tail number. Its windows were empty black spaces. I felt a chill go down my back. I remembered rule number 6 in a whisper, "Don't go near it." In the control booth, turn off the lights and bide your time. I squatted down behind the glass and cut the booth light, my fingers shaking. The fog outside grew thicker, almost alive, as the blackness closed in. With its landing lights blinking steadily and purposefully, the aircraft rolled closer. It then came to a stop right in front of the terminal. Inside the cockpit, something moved. I saw a face peering back at me from the glass. It wasn't a pilot, not fully human, at least. Its features were deformed, stretched, and incorrect, as though someone had attempted, but failed, to recreate a face from memory. I could sense it observing me, examining me with eyes that didn't reflect anything I knew. The engine hummed and vibrated through the floor as I remained kneeling, motionless, counting my own breaths. The sound then gradually disappeared into the mist. I ventured to take another look. The aircraft has vanished, or maybe it had never existed at all. She showed up just as the rules had promised. A uniformed woman floated down the concourse toward Gate A1 at 4 a.m. Her hair was spotless, and she walked calmly and precisely. However, there was a problem. She moved too precisely and too fluidly, as if she were floating in the air instead of walking on the shiny floor. Her outfit was nearly glowing in the low light, seemingly unaffected by the shadows. Sharper than terror, curiosity tore at me. I wanted to yell at her and find out who she was, but I kept thinking about rule number 7. Don't talk to her. Don't follow her. I scarcely dared to breathe as I made myself remain motionless. She moved her head slightly as she got closer to the glass doors at Gate A1, and I saw her reflection. However, it wasn't correct. Her stance was not consistent with the reflection. Unlike the genuine figure, her mirrored face leaned toward me. With my heart pounding in my chest, I staggered back, and she was gone when I blinked. No footsteps. There was hardly a hint of movement. The hallway is vacant. I went back to the main desk and sank into the chair as if it would help me stay grounded. Now the air was oppressive, electric, and heavier. As a constant reminder that the night had not yet let go, even the lights felt brighter, buzzing over my head. Then Keller emerged at the far end of the corridor. He appeared normal, worn out, and almost human. I felt a wave of relief go over me. "Good morning," he remarked nonchalantly. "How did your first evening go?" I nearly let out a rough, choked laugh. "Horrible," I murmured. Keller arched an eyebrow and said, "You didn't tell me this place was haunted." "Haunted." I extended the clipboard. He scowled as he turned through the documents, saying, "The rules." I followed them all. My mouth went dry as he gently continued, "Ben, I didn't give you any rules tonight. You gave me this when I entered." Pale, he shook his head. "No, I spent the entire night in the maintenance room." "Observe," he said, rotating the clipboard. "Nothing. Each page. Tidy. No handwriting. No written guidelines. Nothing." Keller peered at me with such intensity that my stomach knotted as his expression changed from one of uncertainty to one of terror. "Ben, what time did you start your shift?" he said cautiously. 1:30, I murmured while attempting to comprehend the situation. "You instructed me to." His face turned pale. He muttered, almost to himself, "No one has worked the 1:30 a.m. shift here in months." The blood drained from my face as I said, "Not since the accident last February." Then it dawned on me that I had been strolling through a night that was not meant for anyone to survive the airport, the regulations, the fog, the shadows. A night that I had been anticipating my arrival. I wanted to go out, to dash into the mist outdoors and never turn around. However, the main doors had vanished as I turned to face the exit. I saw her again in the distance, the woman from Gate A1 as the terminal stretched on forever, motionless and oppressive. And she was grinning this time. My face lost its color till I could practically feel the cold under my flesh. "What mishap?" Even though I already feared the response, I whispered. Keller paused, but it was too long to be casual. "Flight 117, he muttered. "Cargo aircraft crashed when taking off. Poor vision due to heavy fog. It caught fire close to Gate B3. I had been cautioned not to follow this guideline." His voice was hardly audible above a mumble as he swallowed. That night, the security guard on duty was never able to escape. His clipboard was simply located close to the gate. I gazed at him, my words trapped somewhere between my teeth, burnt around the edges. The fluorescent lights above flickered as if the structure itself recalled, and the air appeared to thicken. Then, over the PA system, a faint, static-filled voice said, "Attention. Passengers, pay attention. Flight 117 has touched down. Kindly head to Gate B3. The announcement reverberated through the deserted airport, warped and mechanical, as if it had passed through a cemetery of severed cables before coming to us. Keller's visage tightened as he swung his head toward the ceiling speakers. "Who in the world activated that?" he growled. However, I was already aware. I turned to face the security monitors behind him, and a deep-seated fear seized my chest. A stream from the front desk was visible on the screen, which flashed slightly. A figure was seated in the chair I had just moved out of, putting on my uniform, head tilted in the same direction, quietly placing their hands on the desk, and the identical clipboard in front of him. I was immobile for a moment. The building itself seemed to be breathing as the static from the PA system blended with the hum of the monitors. Keller attempted to change the feed by reaching for the keyboard, but the keys were unresponsive. Lines of interference crawled across the screen like veins as it flashed furiously. The figure turned to face the camera as the vision cleared once more. In my direction, I became aware that the face staring back at me was no longer mine. As the fluorescent light blew across the screen, it was pallid, hollow, and flickering between unidentifiable shapes. A gentle vibration started in the room. A conveyor belt moaned to life somewhere in the distance. The fog enveloped the terminal like a cocoon as it crept closer to the glass outside. Keller yelled something, but I was unable to hear it. I felt as though I was being drawn underwater as the sound faded. Now all I could hear was the calm, patient PA voice saying, "Flight 117 has landed. Please proceed to Gate B3. I noticed movement, my reflection standing behind me in the monitor's black reflection. The last flare of the screen was followed by a calmer, almost breathing sound as the hum of electricity subsided. The world outside the terminal had altered by the time I looked up. The white fog had faded. It didn't feel warm, but it did gleam slightly, coated in gold by the impending daybreak. It was similar to the kind of light you see in dreams when you can't tell if you're remembering or waking. I opened my mouth to say something, but my voice trailed off between air and thought. It seemed impossible to disrupt the silence that was around me. Was I still Ben, the night watchman who adhered to a set of unachievable rules? Or had I changed into something quite different, something that was waiting? The question echoed in my head like footsteps in a deserted hallway. In the darkness, I could practically hear the steady clack of my own patrol from earlier, the sound of shoes on shiny floors. The PA system came back to life somewhere deep within the terminal. It was quieter this time, almost sympathetic. The words persisted, repeating like a lullaby from the other side of sanity. You'll know if you did everything right. And I understood in that moment, while I was still present. Not gone, but not living as I had remembered. Right here, waiting, the vacant rows of chairs, the quiet vending machines, and the hollow hum of a place caught between days were all illuminated by the sunshine that seeped through the glass. Then I noticed a door open close to the lobby in the security window's reflection. A new silhouette emerged, weary, gullible, and carrying a brand new cup of coffee. One more night watchman. One more for me. My lips moved, but it wasn't voluntary. Rather, it felt like a script had already been written for me. I held out the clipboard, which no longer felt like paper at all, and gave a small smile when the new guard turned to face me. I whispered, "You're here early. You'll have to abide by these guidelines. The fog becomes a brilliant white in the morning. Flight 117 has landed," the speaker rang again. As the carousel started to spin somewhere deep inside the terminal,